Jordan had played in the 1984 Olympics just before his rookie season. He led that team in scoring, and of course, they won a gold medal. He wasn't so sure about playing again in '92.
He was equivocating, I think would probably be the proper term, when I first talked to him. And, I'm trying to tell him it's one of a kind thing. It'll be the greatest team ever. You'll have a wonderful time. We'd love to have you, blah, blah, blah. And that was the initial conversation. And at the end of it, he said, I'll think about it. I don't know. But okay, probably.
Turns out Jordan had decided to go following that phone call, but he wanted to keep that under wraps so he wouldn't have to deal with the ensuing publicity regarding his participation. Besides, Jordan wasn't signing up just for the glory or pride of representing his country. He had other reasons.
Look, my only reason for going was to see how the other guys competed. I heard about it, you read about it. I knew how I practiced. I wanted to see how everybody else practiced, and compete in that environment with no cameras.
Jordan's longtime agent, David Falk, thinks there might have been another motivation, too.
And I think at the Olympics, there was an underlying current. Was it Magic? Was it Bird? Was it who was the best? And I think after the Olympics, there was no question after that he was the alpha dog. I think that's one of the things that motivated him to play.
The selection process was an inexact science. Unlike past Olympic qualifiers, there'd be no tryouts. Can you imagine bossing Magic and Michael around, telling them to line up for the Mikan drill? It became an intriguing and somewhat secretive undertaking, leading to rampant speculation. Who was in? Who was out? What were they looking for? Have you heard anything? Thorn said the 10-person committee initially met in Orlando, and their process was informal, conversational. They drew up a lengthy list of names and began constructing a potential roster. The roster filled quickly. By the fall of 1991, Pippen, who knew Jordan was a yes, signed on. Magic, who had announced his retirement from the Lakers as he learned to live with his HIV diagnosis, was ecstatic his illness did not disqualify him. Robinson, the lone holdover from 1988, couldn't wait for a shot at redemption. Karl Malone and John Stockton, joined at the hip throughout their careers, accepted as a pair. Then there was Ewing, who had won gold with Jordan back in 1984 and was excited to represent his country again. Bird initially declined because of his crippling back issues, but Gavitt finally sold him on his role as an elder statesman and clutch shooter. Barkley all but begged the selection committee to take him. It wasn't his basketball skills that gave them pause. It was, as Welts recalls, his proclivity for late-night antics.
Yeah, he was always, when we were at the league office, there was a headache on regular cadence with Barkley, right? Whatever, it would be something, right? So in terms of who we thought would be the best representative, I think there was a little hesitation at the beginning.
Barkley assured them he would not be the proverbial ugly American. He went on to lead the Dream Team in scoring and became the most beloved player in Barcelona. Chris Mullin, a three-point specialist, was hopeful his skill set would be prioritized this time around.
Leading up to the actual selection, I think there was, say 20 names or something out there. So I've heard some rumblings, but I got a call from my agent, Bill Pollack, and said, you were asked to join the team. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So a lot of those guys I looked up to and idolized as a kid.
The final two spots were not decided until May of 1992. One would be a college player to appease the amateur officials who had been running the Olympic program for years and had suddenly been boxed out. Duke star Christian Laettner was given that nod. Drexler, dismayed he was not part of the original 10, got the final spot. He was quietly battling a knee injury and would have undergone surgery had he not been chosen, but happily postponed the procedure.
I had major knee problems, but you can't, back then, you couldn't let everybody know because they'd come and kick you right in your knee. So you either have to play and shut up or don't play.
Once the final roster was released, the Dream Team quickly became known as much for who wasn't on the team as for who was. The notable omission was Isaiah Thomas, two-time champion, five-time All-NBA selection, 11-time All-Star, and star point guard for Dream Team head coach Chuck Daly when the Pistons won their championships. Thorn said the committee met one final time in Springfield and decided to go with Magic and John Stockton as their two point guards, knowing that Scottie Pippen could also fill that role for them. He acknowledges that Isaiah Thomas was also worthy and extremely disappointed he wasn't chosen.
Well, he, obviously would have liked to do it. But, as I said, I think any player would like to have done it at that time. You could certainly make the case that he should have been on the team because he was a great player.
Camaraderie matters, though, and that's really what it comes down to, right?
Well, that's certainly a big part of it.
From a purely basketball standpoint, Thomas's omission was a glaring snub. Jordan and Pippen, who never bothered to conceal their dislike for their rival, were quickly fingered as the culprits who conspired to keep him off. Other Dream Teamers were badgered about whether they, too, expressed a desire to exclude Isaiah, according to Barkley.
And I want to go on the record saying this, and I've said it 100 times, and it clearly finally came out this year that Michael did say he didn't want him on the team. I was never asked that question. Isaiah probably should have been on the team, but that always drove me crazy because I've said it 1,975 times. They never mentioned Isaiah Thomas to me. It was never like, will you play if Isaiah's not on the team? That never happened.
The situation was particularly awkward for Daly, who presumably had enough clout to push for his own player, just as John Thompson had done in 1988 with Charles Smith. But Daly didn't. Mullen insists there were bigger forces at work.
And we all know there was a lot of reasons for Isaiah probably not being on that team. I don't think Chuck Daly was one of those reasons. There was well documented with Michael and the Celtics even. There was a nasty rivalry there. Magic and Isaiah had a little split at that point in time. So there was more going on, and I think less about Chuck Daly.
We will hear from Isaiah in the next episode on why he feels he wasn't part of the Dream Team club and why his relationship with his fellow superstars was so divisive. Shaquille O'Neal considers Isaiah a mentor and a friend. He even asked Thomas to present him at his Hall of Fame induction. So I asked Shaq if he ever talked to Isaiah about the Olympic snub.
He thinks, I don't want to repeat what he said, but he think it was some trickery involved in that. A couple of people didn't want him. They haven't gone on record saying that, but he's saying, just put it this way, he hates Scottie Pippen.
Shaq was dealing with his own disappointment at the time. He was an All-American at LSU, the #1 pick in the NBA draft. Yet Leitner, who outplayed him in a head-to-head college meeting and enjoyed the benefit of his coach, Mike Krzyzewski, being on the selection committee, was taken ahead of him.
I was mad, but it just gave me more motivation to be better. I was very upset. But then my father, let me tell you something about my father and Uncle Jerome. They was real. He said, hey, man, he won 2 in college. What'd you do? And then first time I played him, he killed me. He destroyed me. And then I'm not racist or anything, but that white boy ate me up.
Leitner would become a bit player in an otherwise basketball extravaganza that oozed star power and fascinating interactions among this galaxy of dynamic personalities.